Hi all, my name is Erica, aka ECR Horses 1901, and today my microphone is actually on. Welcome to part 4 of tier ranking every classic scale Breyer model horse mold. This is the final video in this, well, kind of the final video in the series. I'll explain more at the end. So if you haven't watched the previous 3, I do recommend going back and starting at the first video, which I will also link to at the end of this one. I don't really have anything else to say, so let's get to it. Shire, aka Shire A. Introduced in 2002, sculpted by Kathleen Moody. Believe it or not, this is the first draft mold we have seen on the classic scale. I will say he is pretty nice. As we'll note in a few minutes though, this mold actually has 2 different head and neck positions, and this is the first one. This version of the mold has only been part of 3 regular runs. Its main run from 2002 to 2008, simply as Shire. From 2003 to 2004, he was part of a set with Shire B called Delivery Wagon with Clydesdale Team, and from 2015 through 2017 as one of the Best of British sets along with a Corgi. Other than that, he has been a handful of special runs, but here's the use that I find the most interesting. Apparently, at the Scottsdale Arabian show in February of 2002, a variety of bronze versions of this model were given out. BreyerValueGuide.com says 50 were made, but I couldn't verify that anywhere. In any case, I think it's an interesting choice to give out a bronze version of a draft horse at an Arabian show, but maybe that's just me. Nice enough model, but he's going to be in B tier because there aren't any I would personally spring for. Shire B, introduced in 2003, sculpted by Kathleen Moody. Here you can see that this version of the mold has a more tucked in head. I'm not as fond of this guy because of that, even though he has a couple of individual models that I do like. Those are 2 of the 3 models which made up the 2018 Web Special Callahan, particularly the Matte Silver Bay and the Glossy Palomino Sabino. That Web Special also came in a silver filigree, which normally I'm on board with, but I don't think it suits him. This guy has been a Breyer Fest live auction model once, back in 2003 as a dappled buckskin with black points. Honestly, it just looks bay to me, but maybe he looked different in person. He sold for $900, which was pretty okay. Theoretically, I should put this guy in A tier because I like him better than the A version, or I should say there's more models on this mold that I like more so than the A version. But the tucked head is really not as flattering, so he will also live in B tier. Show Arabian, aka Best in Show Arabian, introduced in 2008, sculpted by someone. Spoiler alert, the next 2 molds will also be Best in Show breeds, and the last one, the Thoroughbred, is listed as being sculpted by Kitty Cantrell. So it's possible that the other 2 were as well. I just don't know. Anyway, these are, interesting. I don't know what Breyer's intention was with this series, but it is interesting that these models look more like customs, what with the herring and the details like glass eyes, than they look like original finish models. To be honest, I don't love it. Applause for Breyer trying something different, but I am not really a fan. And the thing is, the one time this mold has appeared as a typical Breyer with the realistic colorway, I am talking about Onyx from 2010's Breyer Fun Days. It's actually a good mold. For an Arabian, it's nice and it's not overly typey. Well, sadly for this mold's ranking, other than Onyx, I don't like any of the other models that have been made on this mold. Gemini has this creepy cartoon eye, Marigold and Kristoff are just eh, and Zenith is nothing to write home about. I have to go with C tier, even if I wish I could rank her higher. Show Stock Horse, aka Best in Show Quarter Horse. introduced in 2008, sculpted by possibly Kitty Cantrell. Well, the good news is that when you take away the herring, specifically the mane, this guy is actually very nice. He's been used a decent amount, certainly more times than the show Arabian. He's one of those molds that looks good in both realistic and decorator colorways, which is always an asset. For example, we have this 2008 Ariat mold, who was sold by Ariat dealers. He's a simple dappled gray, but for once we have a really nice example of that colorway. I also really like this dark bay roan quarter horse, who was a regular run from 2013 through 2016. He looks more roany in certain pictures, and I find that interesting, kind of more like the varied paint jobs that we used to get with Breyers. The last time this mold was used was in 2017 as Calvin, a web special who I'm going to guess was a gambler's choice, with 500 pieces each of a matte bay blanket Appaloosa, a matte chestnut blanket Appaloosa, and a glossy metallic interference blue blanket Appaloosa. He's a pretty cool guy, and we're going A tier. Show Thoroughbred, aka Best in Show Thoroughbred, introduced in 2008, sculpted by Kitty Cantrell. Even though the braids are theoretically on the wrong side of the neck, this is the Best in Show mold that I like the most. The tail is still a lot, but I think the overall picture is better than the other two models in this series. As a normal Breyer, he's fine, though similarly to what I said about the Morgan Mare mold a few videos back, some of the models on this mold come across as very fake. And yes, again, I know they are fake. But, like, exceptionally so. Compare this nice gray from the 2010 World Equestrian Games 3-horse set to this American Pharaoh, who was a regular run from 2016 through 2017. Do you see what I mean? He's looked good more often than not. His biggest sin is just not being an interesting model most of the time. He's a B tier only because some of the models have a certain moxie. Silky Sullivan, introduced in 1975, sculpted by Maureen Love. A tier. Before I even get into it, he's going to be A tier. I love this little guy. Is he a good portrait of the real Silky Sullivan? Jury's out on that one, because I couldn't find very many pictures of the real horse. At least none that looked akin to how he's shown here. In any case, I've always gotten pony vibes from this mold. I don't know, maybe because it's classic scale, maybe it's something to do with the pose, but whatever it is, I don't look at him and think Thoroughbred. In any case, let me tell you the tragic tale of my copy of T-Bone, who was a flea-bitten gray on this mold from 1991 through 1992's After School series. If you've watched my Namo Paymo video from 2024, then you have heard this story, but hang in there. So this was a model that I kept from my carpet herd, although at some point back then, in the 90s, I must have decided that I wanted to make him an Appaloosa because I had drawn some very not realistic spots on his hindquarters that I did my best to remove when I dug my horses back out in late 2023, but nothing was taking those spots off. So along came last year's Namo Paymo, and I decided that I wouldn't mind having a go at repainting this guy because he wasn't going to be a show horse anyway. So it didn't matter if I did something wacky to him, like making him a rainbow leopard Appaloosa, for example. So I took the initial steps of, sanding down some of his rougher bits, and that was no problem, and then it was time for the primer. And after that, I don't know what happened. His near side looked great. It was smooth, no issues, ready to go. But the far side, his other side, unfortunately, I wish I had taken a picture of what had happened, but even though I sprayed both sides of the horse the exact same way. His right side, the far side, was super rough, and I hadn't touched his sides with the sandpaper or anything like that, so I don't know what would have caused that. So I tried sanding down the rough spots and reapplying primer, but at that point it was just even worse. It was completely blotchy and uneven, and at that rate I really didn't know how to fix it. And frankly, I was starting to not care enough to. I also had an old Smokey the Cow horse body laying around, and he is who I eventually went with instead as my Namo horse. And I ended up giving my botched Silky Sullivan away for free to whoever wanted him, whoever wanted the challenge of trying to fix him. Yeah, at one of the horse shows I attended, I had a small number of horses for sale or trade, and I had him out there with a big free sign, and somebody did take him. So that's the sad story of my T-bone. Anyway, this mold has been used quite a bit, at least until 2002, when he was part of a QVC set winning colors, Ladies of the Bluegrass, as this dark gray. I wonder if, as someone mentioned in a comment on one of my previous videos, Breyer simply doesn't have permission to use this mold anymore due to it originally being a Maureen Love Hagen Renneker design. I don't know, but I am a forever fan, and as I mentioned at the beginning, he is A tier. Sombra, introduced in 1994, sculpted by Rowland Shaney. He is the counterpart to the Fighting Mustaino mold we saw in the second video. I just do not care for the horses in this series, for the most part, and Sombra is no exception. Due to being part of the Walmart America's Wild Mustang series, he has been used pretty consistently, at least until about 10 years ago, when he last appeared in 2014 as a chestnut pinto in the set Mustang and Hinto Gray Foal. He is awkward, perhaps even more so than the Raring Mustaino, and so we have an F tier. Standing Thoroughbred, introduced in 2006, sculpted by Jane Lunder. This guy's first outing was actually as the 2006 gallery release Tally Ho, which is very similar to the 2012 Breyerfest store special we saw 2 videos back, Fox Hunt. I don't hate it, but I also don't think it's great, especially as an introduction for this mold. After that, this mold was then put on the back burner until 2014, when it was used as Amelia, Appendix Quarter Horse, 2014 Classic Horse of the Year. Since then, it stayed in rotation as a regular run and still is currently. The only time he has been a special run was in 2015 as the web special Andreas, a pearly lavender Tobiano unicorn who came with this sparkly blanket. This is another more modern mold who looks good sometimes, such as with this Grella Pinto who was given out as part of the 2024 to 2025 Kids Club Deluxe membership, but at other times he's got that too fake thing going on. An example of this is the pearly gray Tricaner from 2021. Because he's mostly been fine, I'll put him in A tier, but know that there is an asterisk next to its inclusion. Stock Horse Gelding, introduced in 2002, sculpted by Summer Prosser. This is another mold that started as a gallery release, and I'm very fond of it, Sir Buckingham. I have seen him for sale, in person even, and it's been really tempting, but because he's not a super love and he doesn't have much showing utility, I have passed on him thus far. This is also another mold who had some downtime between his first and second releases, and that was in 2014, as the Breyerfest store special 350-piece run Let's Celebrate, aka Let's Not. Since 2014, he's been in regular rotation with regular runs and various special editions. Most recently, in 2023, he was a regular run Pintalusa. He's an okay mold who has had a few nice models over the years. B tier. Swaps, introduced in 1975, sculpted by Maureen Love. Another of the vintage racehorse molds, and I think he's a nice one. Aside from Swaps, he's also been used to portray Seattle Slew in a 1988 Hobby Center 1,000-piece run, and Seabiscuit as a 2003 Blockbuster special. In 2017, he was a very nice web special named Scotty, who appeared in 3 different, more stock horse-inspired colorways, including this matte Bay Roan Blanket Appaloosa, a glossy dark bay Tobiano, and a glossy silver bay with chrome. But perhaps his most infamous model is Cloud, a 1995 through 1996 B-Ranch series who had rather interesting markings, even by vintage Breyer standards. Well, if you were collecting around last April, Breyer released a set of April Fool's blind bags recreating 4 different interesting colorways from the past in stablemate form. And this colorway on Swaps was one of the 4 that was chosen. Aside from this model, I think he's nice and I can rest easily knowing he is in A tier. Terang, introduced in 1975, sculpted by Maureen Love. This is another racehorse mold that isn't innately flashy, and without over-examining his conformation, I like him. He's very pleasant at first glance. He's been used quite a bit over the years, as you might expect. My favorites include this really bright chestnut, who is part of a 2001 classic racehorse 3-piece set, along with a Man o' War and Silky Sullivan, sold through QVC. I also really like the 2021 Vintage Club offering, Thoroughbred Champion, in which he appears as a lovely, glossy, dark bay on a wooden presentation base. Even without the base, that's a great model. I have no beef with this horse, and he can join the many others in A tier. Trotting Stock Horse Foal, introduced in 2008, sculpted by Kathleen Moody. The good streak had to end at some point. I don't like his face, literally. Rather, it's that his head just looks too big for his body, which would otherwise be fine. That aside, I am just not that fond of any of the individual models, although like a lot of foal molds, Breyer has found many uses for him since his debut. If I had to choose one, and I probably should, I would spring for the unicorn version, part of the 2018 online-only duo Sirius and Vega. From that angle, he doesn't look bad, and he certainly looks better compared to the Warm Blood Foal, who we will get to shortly. D tier, no regrets. Wahoo King, introduced in 2000, sculpted by C.M. Herden. Okay, another one of these classic scale action molds, and you know what? This guy is actually my favorite. Unfortunately, he's only been used 4 times in total, and the last time was back in 2008 as the regular run Hotshot. I would say that's probably the last time that we will ever see him, but considering Breyer is using the Hollywood Dunnett mold for one of this year's Breyerfest models, I guess anything can happen. But just look at this guy from 2000 though. He's really nice. We're going B tier. Walking Draft Horse, introduced in 2019, sculpted by Mel Miller. Not gonna lie, my first thought, especially upon looking at his initial run model, Mighty Muscle, is that he's kinda boring. And maybe that was the case there, but there have been several fun decorators on this mold. In 2020, he was the Breyerfest store special Green Man, with the Green Man design on either side, and some old school dappling going on with the coat in a really appealing shade of green. That was a 1,500 piece run. Then in 2024, he was used for 2 different decorators. First was Tehran, who was one of the Elements collection. I know a lot of people did not like this one, but he was my second favorite, only to Brandel. I do tend to like greens and browns though, so this colorway was right up my alley, and it's actually a little bit surprising that I have not picked one up yet. Then for Halloween that year, he was Draftula, a color shift purple red pinto with bat designs throughout, and my favorite detail, little fangs on either side of his mouth. If this mold's realistic colorways were as good as his decorators, he would be S tier, but because they aren't, to A tier we will go. Warmblood Foal, introduced in 2008, sculpted by Susan Carlton Sifton. Okay, the end is in sight. Time for our last 3 molds, starting with this guy. He feels like an older mold. I was honestly surprised to see he was from 2008 and not from the 90s, for example. He has been part of about 1,000 different regular run sets, all types of breeds, 2 unicorns, and 1 online special back in 2014, Glitter and Gem, who look kind of color shifty, though I'm not positive that that's the case. We've seen some great foals, we've seen some tragic ones, but the Warmblood foal is a pretty solid C tier. Warmblood Mare, introduced in 2007, sculpted by Susan Carlton Sifton. This girl also started as an Ariat model, which we saw previously with the Best in Show quarter horse. Unlike the walking draft horse, who had great deco colorways, but iffy realistic ones, this mold is the exact opposite. Some of her nice examples include Fawn, a 2012 Mid-States distributing model, and Black Caviar, who was this semi-gloss dark bay regular run from 2015 through 2016. Decorators, however, I present to you Peace, Love, and Horses, a 2014 through 2015 regular run, and the much more questionable Decorate Emoji Horse, who came blank, just solid black, but you got these 60 emoji stickers that you could then decorate him as you wished. This was a 2018 through 2020 regular run. And last but certainly not least, she was part of that Breyer Blossoms collection in 2012, which I know is a me problem, but I will hold it against her. It's going to be B tier because while the realistic colorways are good, they aren't the best ever, whereas some of these decorators are really bad. Warmblood Stallion, introduced in 2008, sculpted by Summer Prosser. And finally, we're not going to go out on a particularly high or low note, but that's okay. During his first year, 2008, he was actually used in 3 different ways, in 2 different sets, including the Saddle Club Tacking Up gift set featuring Comanche, the Warmblood Horse and Foal set, and he was also the model for that year's Breyer Fun Day, Tivoli. He's been used a ton, including currently, in the Power and Precision Horse and Foal set, as Black Beauty in the Black Beauty Horse and Book set, and as Lysander, a unicorn. He's fine, and to be honest, I have a hard time putting my finger on exactly what it is that I don't like about him. I think it might be the face, specifically the placement of his eye, which occasionally does not look right to me. Other times it looks fine, and originally I had put this here as an example of it looking okay, this otherwise questionable Butterfly Kisses deco from 2015 to 2016, but as I'm sitting here looking at it again, I think this might be one of the problems. And I am speaking specifically about the eye placement, the rest of this is terrible. Well, anyway, with that, we are going to crawl to a close with a final C tier. And that leaves us with temporary totals of 5 molds in S tier, 16 in A tier, 18 in B tier, 21 in C tier, 11 in D tier, and just 4 in F tier. And I say that these are temporary totals because, as I did with the traditional mold rankings, I will be doing a short wrap-up video in which we'll look at some trends, maybe some basic stats, and also see if there are any molds whose placement in the rankings gets reconsidered. It happened with some of the traditional scale molds, I'm sure it will happen again here. But that's all for today, so if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and your comments are always welcome. I hope you'll have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.